Dungeons & Dragons is full of toxic players, and odds are you're one of them. Let's take a look at the top toxic traits and see how they might actually be positives. When I first started playing Dungeons & Dragons, pretty much every session I walked away with self-doubt. Did I actually add to the session, or did I detract from it and the fun of the other people there? I realized that the quickest way to figure out how to make yourself the best player possible and to have the most confidence is to identify the key mistakes that you make and then figure out how to address them. So let's jump right in. The first type of toxic player is the attention seeker. This is the player who always needs the spotlight on them. They take point in every single role-playing encounter, and they always play to their character's strengths and follow their character's backstory. Are they playing a barbarian? If so, we're going into combat. Are they playing a rogue? It's time for some stealth. And then there's the lost. These are the players who never seem to know what the other characters' backstories are, might not even remember their own backstory, and certainly don't know what's happening in the campaign itself. The next toxic player is the rules lawyer. This is somebody who's more focused on making sure that everyone's following the rules as written than making sure that we're all having fun and telling a cool story. When it becomes a problem is when they bog down the session by constantly bringing up these rules, undermining the DM and slowing progress. This brings us to the spectator. A spectator is somebody who'd rather sit back and watch the story unfold than actually participate in it. This might not seem like a toxic trait, but it is detrimental when it continues session over session. And then there's the gridlock. These are the players who take so much time at every given fork in the path because they're so worried about death or about getting wounded, trapped, or just making an unoptimal decision that they would rather stand at a door for 30 minutes then do a couple quick checks and walk through it. It might seem like this isn't a huge problem, and don't get me wrong, there are moments to stop, deliberate, and plan. But if you have 5 or 6 of these moments in every session, it can easily take what should have been a 20-minute segment of the session and turn it into a full 2 hours. And finally, there's the uninformed. These are players who don't know even the most basic rules in the game. You don't need to know every rule in Dungeons & Dragons to play. In fact, you don't need to know most, but you do need to know enough to run your character. It is not the Dungeon Master's job to know the ins and outs of your character and to be able to help you along the way. Now that we've gone over all the toxic traits, let's see how we can make them positives. All right, attention seekers, the good news is you're actually a good player, you're just using your powers for evil. So instead of focusing the spotlight on yourself, focus the spotlight on other players, asking people questions, drawing in conversations, engaging with non-player characters. The other players and the Dungeon Master will notice this, they will appreciate it, and then they will shine the spotlight back on you. The lost. This is a tricky one because you have to figure out exactly why you're not engaged. Are you not interested in the story? Is there too much time between sessions and forgetting what happened last time? Is the plot too confusing and you just can't follow it? Offer to be the note taker. Go to the Dungeon Master and say, I will take notes every session and I will send them to you. The DM can then go through and make small tweaks and edits as necessary, and then the DM can send that out to the group. Because you're required to take notes accurately, it will force you to be engaged in every session. All right, rules lawyers, here's how you take your power and use it for good. Approach the Dungeon Master and ask them if they would like help with rulings. You are a resource for the Dungeon Master that they can point to you and say, hey, can you go please look up the grappling rules while I focus on the combat? If something comes up in a session that you know is not following the rules and the Dungeon Master's going with it, don't bring it up in that moment unless it is essential. Instead, take a note of it and bring it up with the Dungeon Master maybe the next day. All right, spectators, so what you need to do is take a step back and look at the 3 pillars of Dungeons & Dragons: exploration, combat, and role-playing. Figure out which one you enjoy the most and you're the most comfortable with. Make sure that your character is actually geared to do that. If you realize that you're really interested in doing more roleplay and you have a barbarian, maybe that's why you're not engaged. Figure out what your pillar is, make sure your character is geared towards that pillar, and force yourself in those moments to actually jump into the game and play. I guarantee you, if you put yourself out there a couple of times, it'll feel a lot more natural moving forward. The gridlock. You are a vital part of the D&D group in that you're actually the one who's going to step back and make plans, but your power has to be used in the right place and the right time. There are moments when infiltrating the boss's lair that it makes total sense to take a step back and talk through the detailed plans of how you're going to disarm traps and how you'll enter through 2 different passages and who will be in front, who will stay behind, what spells will be cast in preparation. But this should be done relatively infrequently or the whole session slows down. Instead, you need to trust the dungeon master and the other players that they're not going to put your character into horrible situations all of the time without any sort of foreshadowing. Next time you come to a relatively trivial decision, just make a call. I'm going to go left, or I'm going to go through that door, or I'm going to talk to this person. I guarantee that it's going to actually be a lot more interesting, the story will move faster, and you'll get a lot more comfortable doing that moving forward. All right, Uninformed. There are tons of resources out there, whether it be flipping through source books or watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, listening to podcasts. There are a ton of resources that you can go to quickly get yourself up to speed. Another trick if you have more of an issue with running your character during combat is to make a My Character for Dummy sheet. So if you ever get stuck in combat and you're not sure what to do, you have your top options there and ready to go. And here's the dirty secret. We all have all of these traits as we play D&D, and that's okay. D&D isn't supposed to be a perfectly scripted movie, TV show, or book. It is a fun, mistake-riddled journey that you and your friends are going on together. Do you have an interesting story about a time that you showed one of these toxic traits? Let me know in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.